I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you. You.
Orwell got the three basic questions of the 20th century right: imperialism, fascism, and communism. And that sums up his political and literary achievement.
It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13.
This is the face of our enemy. Look at him, the Eurasian butcher, the reveler in atrocities, the world criminal. This is the enemy our brave soldiers fight in the jungles and the deserts and the polar snows. This is the enemy against whom our brave sailors man the floating fortresses. This is the enemy we can see. But worse than he is the enemy within, the enemy of the people, Emmanuel Goldstein, traitor to the party, arch conspirator, leader of the accursed brotherhood, director of spies and saboteurs. This is he. For Goldstein we can feel only one thing. Hate for Goldstein because he would stab us in the back. Because from his hiding place he helps and directs our Eurasian enemy.
George Orwell wrote 1984 in 1948, and by reversing the last two digits of that year, arrived at the year in which to set his nightmare vision of a world run by the totalitarian state. Orwell was of a generation of socialists who had believed in the Russian Revolution, and had gone to fight for socialism in the Spanish Civil War, and was, like others, vastly disillusioned when word of Stalin's barbarity began to leak to the West. Though 1984 is a denunciation of Stalinism and of Stalin's treatment of truth, that by controlling men's minds, the party controls the truth, it is also a warning to the rest of the world that it is possible to dehumanize man completely and yet for life to go on. In a society that builds machines which act like men and creates men who act like machines, it is possible that you, too, may come to love Big Brother.
I believed that if Hitler and Mussolini managed to help Franco to win, then this would be a defeat for the whole Labour movement throughout the world. We thought, the fascists of the world were ganging together, so a call went out for volunteers to help the Republican government.
Hitler was getting powerful. There were Jewish pogroms being committed, and there was nothing in my soul that was more devastating than to see the Nazis laughing, bastards, laughing while they dragged some poor Jewish woman naked across the street through spit and manure and everything else, and threw her on a sidewalk by the back of the neck, write Jew all over the windows. You know, all this type of stuff. I mean, because I saw that was my family that they were doing it to. You know, if they could do it to Jews, they could do it to my mother. And that son of a bitch, no son of a bitch was going to do it. And something had to be done, you know. And I said, I don't care how, I've just got to get to Spain.
On April 14, 1931, Spain was declared a republic after hundreds of years of monarchy and several years of dictatorships. In July 1936, General Francisco Franco led a revolt backed by the army, a revolt that soon blossomed into full-scale civil war. Foreign intervention in this confrontation seems to have begun right away. By August 1936, Russian workers had begun to send money to the loyalist forces, which were made up of Marxists, communists, socialists, and anarchists, gathered under a loose coalition to fight for the Republic. By spring, Italian and German troops and planes were in action to support Franco's forces. The Nationalists' International Brigade of left-wing partisans, made up of volunteers from many countries, including England, France, and the United States, came to Spain to join the Loyalists. In 1937, Orwell went to Spain as a reporter and remained there as a private in one of these Loyalist regiments, called the PUM, which was the abbreviation for the Partido Obrero de Unificación Marxista, the Party of Marxist Unification. He remained there for several months, and the following year, in 1938, he published Homage to Catalonia.
Europe in 1936. Hitler had been in power for 3 years. Mussolini had ruled Italy since 1922. In Russia, Stalin had begun the show trials and purges of his enemies. Democracy everywhere was on the defensive. Britain and France were fearful of a European war.
At the time, I didn't grasp that this was because there were no weapons to be had. In the POUM militia, the shortage of rifles was so desperate that fresh troops reaching the front always had to take their rifles from the troops they relieved in the line. In the whole of the Lenin barracks, there were, I believe, no rifles except those used by the sentries.
Here's where he becomes an immortal figure instead of just a distinguished one. Within the civil war in Spain, there was also a civil war. There was a civil war within the left. Because as a counterweight to the support of Franco by Hitler and Mussolini, the Spanish Republic turned for arms and for money and for diplomatic support to Stalin's Russia, which was believed by many people at the time, many of the working class, and many of the intellectual classes too, to be a new utopia, to have solved the problems of racism, colonialism, imperialism. Who needs any more to ask any questions? We already have a heaven on earth. It's on the other side of the Ural Mountains, far away, but ruled by a beneficent, godlike person out of whose bottom the sun daily shines. Discovering that this was a huge lie and that those who believed it were capable of anything was Orwell's third greatest achievement. And he did it while he was accused of something that must have wounded him very much, accused of undermining the anti-fascist front by telling the truth. In Catalonia, in Barcelona, the capital of Catalonia, Orwell had lived under, briefly, a communist regime, before most people had in Europe. He'd seen what the Communist Party was like and how it behaved when it was in the saddle, when it thought it was on the winning side. And he'd known what it was to live under a terror and to have people disappear without explanation, and to have censorship and fear.
KZ 6090 Smith W. The repair to your apparatus will be executed immediately.
Correction required as follows. The Times of the 17th of March 1984, copy sent here contains reported speech by Big Brother. He is alleged to have predicted that Eurasian forces would launch an attack in North Africa. Please rectify in accordance with facts.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii. When you're in positions of privileged access, like a systems administrator for these sort of intelligence community agencies, you're exposed to a lot more information on a broader scale than the average employee. And because of that, you see things that may be disturbing, but over the course of a normal person's career, you'd only see one or two of these instances. When you see everything, you see them on a more frequent basis. And you recognize that some of these things are actually abuses. And when you talk to people about them, in a place like this where this is the normal state of business, people tend not to take them very seriously and move on from them. But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it. And the more you talk about it, the more you're ignored, the more you're told it's not a problem. NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can by any means possible that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email. I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government, but I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these. I didn't modify the story. This is the truth. This is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this.
I think privacy is something that is essential to who we are as human beings and is indispensable to pretty much every other single form of human freedom and what it means to be a free, prosperous, creative human being. And the dangers of having the privacy eroded are sometimes elusive for people and yet incredibly profound. A society in which you think or know that you're always being watched is a society that will breed conformity, because when you know that you're always being watched, as all kinds of psychological studies show, as all kinds of other social science demonstrates, when you know that you're being watched, you make choices that you believe are the ones that the judgment of society demands that you make. It's only when you can behave and choose and explore without judgmental eyes being cast upon you, that's really the realm in which dissent and creativity and exploration exclusively reside. So there are all kinds of obvious political dangers to having privacy eroded, but there are also really significant harms on the human and individual and personal level. And there aren't very many people articulating its value or defending it from erosion, and so I just perceive this need in defense of this value that I consider to be one of the most important. In many instances, metadata is actually more invasive than listening to the content of your calls or reading your email. Metadata is the data about your communication. So instead of listening to your phone calls and hearing what you're saying in the phone call or reading your email, which is content, they will collect the information I just described. Who it is who's calling you, how often they're calling you, the duration of the call, where they are when they call you, who you're emailing, who's emailing you, what machines you're using, where you are physically when you do it. For instance, if you are a woman who is making an appointment to have an abortion and you call an abortion clinic and someone's listening to that call, they're not going to hear anything other than, hi, I'd like to make an appointment for 2 o'clock tomorrow. If, though, that person is monitoring the metadata of the call, they will see that this woman has called an abortion clinic. Or if you're somebody with HIV and making an appointment to talk to your HIV doctor, listening to the content of the call will reveal very little. Listening, but knowing the metadata of who you're calling will reveal that you're going to see an HIV doctor. Same with human rights activists talking to informants in dangerous places. Metadata allows the government to know far more about you in many instances than even the content does. And what it also does is it enables them to create a huge picture of your life, of who your associations are, who the people that you talk to, what your network of friends is. Very, very complete picture of what your life is without having to read a single email or listen to a call.
The years ahead, it's only going to get worse until eventually there will be a time where policies will change, because the only thing that restricts the activities of the surveillance state are policy. Even our agreements with other sovereign governments, we consider that to be a stipulation of policy rather than a stipulation of law. And because of that, a new leader will be elected. They'll flip the switch, say that because of the crisis, because of the dangers that we face in the world, some new and unpredicted threat, we need more authority, we need more power, and there will be nothing the people can do at that point to oppose it, and it'll be turnkey tyranny.
The waiters were turning back to their work. One of them approached with the gin bottle. Winston, sitting in a blissful dream, paid no attention as his glass was filled up. He was not running or cheering any longer. He was back in the ministry of love, with everything forgiven, his soul white as snow. He was in the public dock, confessing everything, implicating everybody. He was walking down the white-tiled corridor with the feeling of walking in sunlight and an armed guard at his back. The long-hoped-for bullet was entering his brain. He gazed up at the enormous face. 40 years it had taken him to learn what kind of smile was hidden beneath the dark mustache. Oh, cruel, needless misunderstanding. Oh, stubborn, self-willed exile from the loving breast. 2 gin-scented tears trickled down the sides of his nose. But it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother.
We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.